So, Pailin, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation
You're welcome.
about marketing and influencers, and understanding from your perspective, how this part of the industry kind of works. I'm going to have the students watch. You did a video about kind of your origin story and your background, and you're a professional chef in your training and so forth. So I'm going to have them watch that. But I also was curious. I watched that and I was curious. To me, that kind of took us to 10 or 11 years ago, which are where you first started posting videos on YouTube. Now you've got more than 1 million followers on YouTube or subscribers on YouTube, and you've got published cookbook and have had these successes. Could you talk a little bit about kind of how you got from there, from your first few videos on YouTube to where you are now?
Yeah, slow and steady, basically. I mean, it's been 11 years. So I started with it just as a hobby. But I guess like in the niche of Thai cooking, there really wasn't much going on, and there still isn't in the English language. And at first I thought that it would be used as a little bit of an online resume, that maybe somebody, because I'd always wanted to have a cooking show of some sort. Like the ultimate dream was going to be the Thai Nigella Lawson or something like that, right? But I was fully aware that that's basically impossible. Like, what are the chances of there being the next Jamie Oliver? But I thought that, maybe if I put something out there, one day somebody's going to come and find it and they will offer me to be on television. However, as time went on and YouTube started developing into its own legitimate platform where people can make actual living there, it became not necessary anymore to be discovered by anybody on traditional media, because YouTube was becoming mainstream. So then slowly but surely, followers just kind of started accumulating. And because I feel pretty confident that in the niche of Thai cooking, there really isn't much that's better in the English language, I have to say. There really isn't much that's better, that's more comprehensive. So if you're looking for Thai cooking, you're going to find me one way or another. And then eventually and slowly, people just started accumulating to a point where it became a full-time job, I guess you can call it. Yeah, but there was a point where I decided to pursue it seriously. And that was probably back around 2012, where I started to see potential. And I thought, maybe instead of doing this sort of on the side as for fun, as a hobby, maybe it's worth doing something serious with it and see where it goes. And so then I started publishing regularly. So before, it was just whenever I had time, I would post something. But then when I decided to do it seriously, I started posting regularly. And that was when the growth really skyrocketed. It's still slow compared to some other channels that blow up, because things never went viral for me. It's been the slow and steady growth, but that was the part where it went like this, because I started putting out regular content. And I think that probably triggered something in the YouTube algorithm at the time, where channels with regular content, they're going to think, oh, this is a serious channel, we're going to start to push it out more and more. And then of course, when viewers can expect regular content, they stay and they hang out and they wait for your stuff. So from that point on, it's been a slow and steady growth. And then the coronavirus was another big spike, because people are home, people are consuming a lot more content at home, people are cooking more at home. So that was a huge spike. So that was the point where I crossed 1 million subscribers. Like, I was hanging out at around 900,000. And I kid you not, it feels like I woke up one day and we have surpassed 1 million. And I had completely unexpected it, because the rate at which the subscribers were coming in was so much faster than it was before. And it happened like a couple months, like 3 months before I projected. And so coronavirus has been good for me, and I think for all online content publishers in general.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, there was, I feel like it's maybe less so now, but in the earlier days of the internet, there was what they refer to as a first mover advantage. So if you were kind of early on a platform, you would have a certain amount of momentum. too?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I still think that's true, because like when people ask me about building a YouTube channel, and if you look at the way I started, which I know you went and looked up my first video, you cannot start where I started today. Right? Like the bar has gone so high. Like back then, like you can start with whatever. The expectation was so low.
Yeah.
You didn't have to have anything cool, anything professional looking. So I had the advantage of that. But if I were to start today, you have to start with so much better quality, and the competition is so much more. So in some ways, the earlier adopter advantage is still there.
So I was curious. So obviously you have this super big following on YouTube, and then you've got like significant followings on the other social channels, right? Like, you know, I looked, there was like nearly 100,000 people on Facebook and 80,000 on Instagram or so, I forget. But do you think of yourself as like a person who, a YouTuber, or a person who publishes content on YouTube and the other channels are for marketing essentially? Or how do you think about the kind of constellation of stuff you do?
Yeah, I consider myself a YouTuber 100%. Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter is basically a place where I engage with my followers at a more personal and casual level. And of course, that's where I push new content to, like, hey, you know, here's a new video. But really, that's not where the core of my business is. And usually, you know, we're going to talk about brand partnerships. Usually when brands come, they want a YouTube video. They want to work with you on YouTube because that's where my main thing is. However, recently, with the rise of Instagram being like the ultimate place for brand partnerships, I'm starting to get brands who just want Instagram. Which actually makes it a little bit easier as a content creator, because it's so much easier to create content for Instagram. Not easier, but less time commitment. Because with a YouTube video, you have an existing show, so whatever you create has to really kind of work in there somehow. You can't just like pop a random video here and there, and it has to really work with your existing platform. And then it's a video production and not a photo being taken for Instagram. So with the rise of Instagram, it's kind of good that there's an easier avenue for brand partnership that's not quite so production heavy the way it would be on YouTube.
And do you think about, like, obviously TikTok has emerged as a new channel in the past couple of years, or before that there was Vine. Do you kind of just take those new channels as they come and think, oh, am I gonna bother with this? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I, to be honest, was a late Instagrammer too. Like I really should have started a long time ago, because YouTube has always been my main thing. And I only have so much bandwidth, right? With TikTok now, a lot of people are talking about, well, we should get on TikTok. I'm not in a rush, because the nature of TikTok doesn't really work with the nature of the work that I produce. And is there pressure? Like as a creator, there's always pressure where it's like, well, if you don't get on TikTok now, but at the end of the day, I think I'm at the point now where I'm pretty confident that what I have existing is okay. And should in the future TikTok become a platform where it would kind of work with what I'm doing, then I'm willing to get on that. But I can only do so many things. And also with TikTok right now, there's no way to monetize. So most of the food creators on there are just sort of there sort of to capture the audience, but it's all investment of time and energy right now. Like there's no monetary return. Brands are not really going on there quite yet for food. So, you know, I'm kind of holding off on TikTok, but willing, you know, open and willing to see where it goes.
So as we mentioned, this is a class about influencers and about marketers connecting with influencers and those relationships. And, you know, when I started doing this kind of work many, many years ago, we like treated all people online before we had the language of influencers. We treated them all like journalists. And so
Mm.
they all got press releases and they all got email pitches and that sort of thing. And now I feel like there's this kind of range where there's people who are just real journalists at one end, and then there's a kind of range, because I've looked at a bunch of your videos, and some of your videos feel like journalism to me, like food journalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other videos, then there's a kind of purely more commercial relationship at the other end, where it's a brand sponsorship, if you like. Do you get, how do brands approach you, and do you get offers all along that spectrum, or how do you think about that part of it?
Most of the time, so the videos that you're talking about, that's more like the documentary type, with the Thai Trade Center, that's very unique to that organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten maybe one other offers along those lines, where it's like people wanting to work with me on a documentary type thing. But for the most part, 99% of the time, it is a commercial thing. Like there's a product that they want me to use, to promote, or even if it's just a call out ad, like you might have seen some like the Squarespace and Skillshare, where it's got nothing to do with the video, but you're just inserting that in. So that's another sort of newer way of sponsorship that's come up. And so most of the time it's for that. And usually people just write me and just reach out to me through email. I don't actually get a ton of press releases. I know some other influencers might, but I think it might have to do with the fact that my niche is very, very narrow. And also, I also wonder whether YouTubers don't get as many press releases as Instagram influencers, because it's so much more involved to do a YouTube partnership, because you've got to agree on, it's not like, here's a brand and they want you to make a recipe using this product and post it on Instagram and we're done, and you can do everything just sort of over a few emails. Whereas with YouTube, it's like you've got to like agree on production of an entire video, right? So it's not something that a PR agency can send out, you know, an email to their mailing list of influencers and see who's going to pick up. This is, for YouTube, it's very specialized to that particular channel. Again, it all comes back to, with YouTube, there is a show. Whereas with Instagram, it's a little bit more random, right? Like you can just post whatever. But with YouTube, it's like there's a very clear and specific expectation that the audience have of what you're going to put out. And you cannot just start putting out something else. So I think that's why I don't really see too many press releases like that. Yeah.
And do you get inquiries where people just hope you'll feature their thing on your show without an expectation of payment? You know what I mean? Like, we'll send you this new pot or this new whatever. And
all the time. And I never do it. I completely ignore them. I don't even respond. I mean, I think for, I guess the term now is the micro influencers. Maybe that's something that's enough of a motivation. They want the product, or they want the ability to say that they've been sponsored or something. But for me, and for anybody that I know who does this for a living, whether full-time or part-time, like a blender is nice, but I can't pay my mortgage with a blender. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
It doesn't work as a payment, and I take I mean, like, it's not like I'm offended, but I'm just like, oh, come on, you guys, like, you know.
Sure.
And it's and I think some people might be like, oh, but it's a good way to start. But at the same time, I feel like you've got to have a standard, because if you start doing things for just free products, you know, then when do you stop? When do you start valuing your own self? And I think it all comes down to how you have to really value your work, value the respect that you've earned over the years from your viewers, and how much is that worth to you.
On that topic, I don't want to talk particulars of numbers, but how did you decide how to price yourself, or how did you learn how to price what you offer? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. But sometimes if it comes through an agency, they will just offer a price, which makes it easier. And then I can negotiate up from there.
Sure.
But if people come to me with just a quote, over, like now I just have sort of a standard rate, and over the years I've just started to ask for more and see what I can get away with.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Basically,
as a person who was a consultant myself, that's a good approach.
Yeah, it's basically like, okay, last time I offered this and they said yes, next time I'm going to ask for more. And just see what happens. And then if they really can't afford it, they will come back and say, I'm so sorry, but this is not a number that we can work with. And then we can start to say, okay, do you want something less that fits your budget? Maybe a whole YouTube video isn't affordable, but do you want to just do Instagram or something like that? But I'm at a point now where I get enough sponsored content that I'm comfortable turning down people who are just, you know, it just doesn't work, like their budget. It doesn't work with me. I'm comfortable saying, no, you know what, that's totally okay. Because I also don't want every single video to be sponsored. And so, you know, I think it's easier for me at this point in my career to turn down and charge more because I have the option to. But for influencers who are just starting, I think they're just kind of like wanting to take, and I've been there, and that's how I know. It's like they're wanting to take anything that comes their way because anything is better than nothing.
I mean, I mean, I feel like I maybe should know the answer to this question, but if you were an influencer who had 10,000 followers, how would you know, besides, as you say, kind of experimentation where you're just like, this is yes, no sort of thing. Are there any kind of industry standards or any reports or something somebody could refer to and find?
Yes. I think I've just actually listened to a podcast specifically about this. And I can actually link it to, send it to you at that episode, and you can have your students listen. But there's a formula where it's like a certain amount of cents per view or per like, depending on the platform. I don't remember what that number is, but I think there is a formula out there. And I've also seen companies where they act a little bit like an agency, but it's but it's not personalized, where you can go and sign up. Right. So it's a website, you go and sign up and you put in your numbers, and it'll spit out like, for the number of followers and views that you have, here's how much we're going to pay you.
Right. Yeah.
And then they act as an agency for, you know, and they'll send out mass things like, oh, you know, Tim Hortons has a campaign and who would like to sign up, and they pay you based on those numbers. So I have been on one of those websites just to put in my numbers and see what it spits out. And it was so low. It was so low that I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I would never do anything for this amount of money. And I think the difference is when you go through those kind of agencies, it's like mass produced influencers, right? So you can only charge so much, but that they don't take into account the quality of your content, the kind of authority that you have with your audience. All of that like adds up in value. So, you know, for ballpark, I guess you can use one of those services, but it really depends. I think those social agencies in part exist because companies are used to buying ads in bulk. And so they can buy this kind of social attention in bulk too, maybe. One of my students sent in a question, and they were curious about like how you choose or know what the right brands are to work with, or maybe the opposite. Which ones are the ones you feel like, oh, this is definitely not a good fit? That has been a learning process over the years. And I can tell you that I have done things in the past that looking back, I'd be like, I would not work with them again. Not because they were a bad brand to work with, but it's like the product itself, I felt like that was a bit of a stretch. And in fact, there is a brand of products where they have come back to me twice and I've turned them down just because I just feel like, you know what, I did that and I know you enjoyed it and we both enjoy it, but I've just decided that that's not the right fit for my brand anymore. So basically my rule of thumb now in cooking is if it's something that I would actually personally use, then it's a good fit. But if it's something that comes and it's like, I would never buy this stuff, then I wouldn't do it. Now, you can also make the argument that you might never personally buy this stuff, but maybe your audience would like to buy this stuff. Then, for some people, that's enough. But for me, I have to feel comfortable speaking about the product, that if I would never buy it, I don't want to sell that to my audience.
Right.
So that's sort of my litmus test.
And can I ask,
yeah.
So you've got like Squarespace or something like that as a sponsor. Does it all, I mean, obviously maybe
that's
your website runs on Squarespace.
That's a little different.
Oh, is it?
That's
okay.
A little different, because what I was referring to before was when brands come to me to like use a product in my video. Okay. So like an ingredient. So for example, I'll give you an example of something that I turned down. It was a ready to eat soup line of some sort. And it was enticing because it was a big brand, and but then at the same time, like, this is a channel about cooking food from scratch. Like, I am not here to promote ready-to-eat soup that you can buy from the grocery store. Like, it's food, but it's completely opposite. Would my audience buy something like that? Yeah, maybe. Anybody buys ready-to-eat stuff, but it's just not the spirit of my channel. So that was one that I thought about and said, you know what? No, we're not doing that. But with the call-out ads, that's different. I mean, it still has to be a good brand that I believe in, like Squarespace, Skillshare, all of that. Like, I happy to work with those. But I don't personally use Squarespace. But it's a little different because it's like a commercial break in your show, as opposed to something that's integrated right into your episode. So it's a little bit more flexible there. So I think I have to think a lot harder when it's something that they want me to integrate into my content, as opposed to just like, let's break for a commercial and then it's done and then we move on.
Right. Okay. On a similar note to that, hang on, I'm just looking at my questions here for a second. Yeah. So it seems to me like that marketer who was pitching you a ready-made soup if they'd watch your channel a little bit, they'd know that, okay, you make stuff from scratch, so maybe this isn't a good fit for you. But what does, I guess, positive or negative, what is a good relationship with a marketer or PR firm look like when they treat you well? Or what are some red flags if there have been problems in the past,
Yeah, and I think you brought up such a good point. The number of people who obviously hasn't seen the show and reach out, there's so many of those. Or you can kind of tell that it's sort of like a mass email. So a good relationship would look like somebody who's talking to me as a person and not talking to me as billboard space. You know what I mean? Because because it's sort of like, we influencers are people, and all of their content are very, very personal to them. So if you start treating them like there's some sort of a billboard space that you can buy ads in, that's when it falls apart. And so what that looks like is they've seen your channel, they know the kind of things that you do, they understand your values to some degree. Like, is this channel about junk food, healthy food, quick and easy food, scratch food, or whatever it happens to be? And also the flexibility, I think, is huge for a good relationship, like brands coming to an influencer, not with like, here's all the things that you need to produce, take it or leave it. If it's something like that, I don't tend to enjoy that relationship, because you kind of know that it's cookie cutter for many influencers that they're working with. But if they come like, so here's the idea, and they give you a lot of room for creativity, a lot of room for you to put your own spin on it, that's a good relationship. And then if you come back and say, you know what, I know this is what you asked for, but I think it would be better for my audience if we did this, or there's room for negotiation and flexibility, that is a good relationship. So I'm just trying to think back to like all my long-term relationship, and flexibility is definitely one that's in there. And also just putting, you'd be surprised the number of marketers who don't really seem to think about what we actually have to do to produce the content.
Sure.
And they'll ask things like, you know, like I've done a video, I send it to them for approval, and then they'll say, can you say this instead? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah. No, I've done lots of video shoots and produce client work. You just can't do that. Yeah.
What do you think happens in the editing? Like, I can't make myself say things I never said. And so over the years, I've had to like really be clear with people who ask for video, where we cannot do a reshoot. So anything that you want me to say, or anything that you don't want me to say, which is another big thing, you have to tell me in advance. And if you don't tell me in advance, then you can't ask me to add it after the fact. And I think people who also don't understand video editing, they think that video editing is some kind of magic. Like in the movies, you can make anything appear and anything disappear. It doesn't work like that, right? Like if you know, I had a brand, I remember, it's a story where I was using a product, and at some point halfway through, the product was sitting on the counter, and then at halfway through, I put it away because we've moved on to doing something else. And they said, can you keep the product on the counter? And I said, and how exactly do you want me to do that? Like, we can't go back and reshoot. And so there's 2 points that I had to talk them through that. I said, first of all, it's not possible. And then they asked me, well, can you like just overlay an image of the product? Like, they really wanted the product to be visible the whole time, which they never told me was a requirement or anything that they wanted. And I had to explain to them, I said, listen, it's not going to make a difference. Whatever you think the difference is going to make, the product's already there for like a good 2-3 minutes in the video. The audience now is interested in the recipe. They're not interested in the product sitting on there visible at all times. It's not going to make a difference. And also, the more you make this look like an ad, the less effective it is. This is the nature of product placement, is the more like it looks like an ad, the less it looks real. And then they understood and they were okay with that. But I think as a marketer, you have to think of yourself as the viewer too. Like, when you're watching somebody, do you like it when it's like a constant selling of something? You don't like it, right? And if you don't like it, why would you think it's effective the other way around? So being mindful of that, of what the influencer has to do, what it looks like to the audience, what the audience is thinking. I think that's, if you can think of yourself as a consumer first, I think it'll change a lot of the things that you might ask the influencer to do, or change the nature of questions and things like that. Yeah.
Terrific. One of the assignments, or an assignment associated with this topic, is to make a little, call it a influencer and media outreach kit, which has like a little blurb about their product, and some photos and some sample social posts and that sort of thing. I'm sure you've received versions of this over the years. Do you have any tips or feedback for that particular kind of thing, where like they're providing you with material that's either background material or assets that you might use either in your videos or on social?
So are you talking about something that you send as an initial reach out, or something that you send after you've established that, okay, we are going to work together?
It might be more like in the initial reach out, and you link to a little microsite or a little website that has assets on it. So, you know, oftentimes it'll be for, just so you know, we have all this stuff available to you. So if you're contemplating doing something, I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for you to do it. You know what I mean?
Yes. And there's actually one of the brands that's really good with that is Skillshare. They've got a whole, what they call YouTube marketing kit, where it's a document where they link all the classes that they are okay with you featuring during your spot, So you don't have to go back and ask them, can I feature this class? Can I feature that? Like, you can feature any class from this list. They've got a little B-roll clip that you can use if you want, put on there. They've got images of the logo. They're very clear on what you can do with their logo, what you cannot do with their logo. They're very clear with messaging. Like, here are the things that we would like you to say. Here are the things that we do not want you to say, which is so important. And a lot of times, especially for new brands, they don't know what they don't want you to say until you've said it. And then they're like, well, we don't really want you to say that. But to do your best to really think about what kind of wording you don't want associated with your brand. Like, for example, like for Skillshare, they say, don't call it a course, call it a class, because they want it to not feel like this is a university or college setting. So they don't like the word course, which is really good to know, because if they didn't tell me that, I would probably use the word course at some point. So that's really good. But also at the same time, examples of previous work that they like and approve is really useful. And also the flexibility again. Don't make it look like a set of recipe for instructions and then your post has to somehow end up looking like that. Give the influencer the flexibility to make it look native to their feed.
Actually, let's wrap up with this question then, which is another question from a student. So they say, as someone who enjoys taking photos and posting online, do you have any tips for creating good content? That's quite a big question, but I know you probably do a lot of food photography, or you certainly were involved in the process. Do you photograph food yourself, or do you have somebody do that, like your cookbook and such?
I do it. My cookbook, no, but for videos, yes.
Okay, videos. Do you have any maybe advice for, let's just talk about photographing and rendering, depicting food? Do you have any like best practices or tips on that when you're featuring something like food?
Yeah, I think overall, if the question is any advice for good content.
Yeah, I appreciate that's a big question. I'm trying to narrow it down a bit.
Yeah, I know, but I think I might have something a little better. Okay, so my advice for good content is make sure it's valuable to the passers-by. I think that's the main thing, where people are just, I'm just gonna start posting pretty things and fun things, and there's no substance to it. Right? So you have to ask your question, if a passerby comes and finds this post for whatever reason, what value are they going to get out of it? So if you're going to post something about food, you have a really nice food photo, maybe in your caption you can say something a little bit more informative, a little bit more like, even if you don't give a recipe, say a useful thing or two about the ingredient that you use, so that people are like, this is like really useful information, I'd like to follow them and see what other useful information they give me in the future. So I think that's the key, as opposed to just posting beautiful pictures and hopefully it sticks. There's plenty of beautiful pictures. People don't need more beautiful pictures. But delivering extra value, I think, is harder to find.
If I was going to answer this question a bit myself too, I do also feel like infecting it, but inserting your personality into it a lot too.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like, obviously watching your videos or looking at your social content, it's all inflected through the lens of you, which and you're not afraid to be yourself, because I feel like another mistake young people doing your work might make is try to just copy people or not be themselves, just try to present some version of themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have to be, and you know what? This is a really good point. It is the only way you're going to last. If you are constantly trying to project a certain persona that you think is fun and more attractive than you normally are, you're going to burn out. You need to be yourself, because it's a grind to be an influencer and a content creator, because the line between work and life really blends. It really blends into, and you never really have a day off. because your work is yourself. So if that work is not true, not authentic, it is going to be exhausting to always trying to be somebody else, and it's not going to last. You probably might have come across the concept of creator burnout in the past few years, where it's starting to become a thing, especially in YouTube, because video production is so much more labor intensive, and there's just been a series of creators that have just like reached a breaking point where they just can't do this anymore. And that's not even creators who are not trying to be themselves. It's just the nature of the work is it's so hard on you. And so if you put on top of that, you not loving the content, you not being yourself, there's no way it's going to last. It's going to go, and then eventually people see through you, I think.
Yeah, I can see that it is both. I can see that video in particular is both intimate and laborious, right? Like just takes a long time to make, and it is so personal too.
Yeah, and I think speaking to marketers specifically, if you're going to work with video content creators, you really have to be aware of how much work it is to film a video. It is think about it, you got to set up your cameras, you got to set up the lights, you got to book the venue if you're not doing it at your own place, you got to schedule the camera person. For me, shooting is an all-day situation. You got to get dressed, you got to put on makeup, you got to like do things differently to yourself, and then when it's done, you got to edit the damn thing, you know. So it's not like oh, you know, you can just take a couple of hours and out comes a video.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I believe it. And you have to presumably do all the food preparation as well.
Yes, you got to go shopping.
Right?
You got to go shopping, you got to buy the ingredients, you got to haul it to set, and then you got to cut and chop and do all the dishes, mind you. And so it's so, especially cooking. I mean, vlogs and things like that, it's different. There's obviously less involved there, but if it's any kind of how-tos, there's so much work involved. And even if there's not a lot of physical things involved, even if it's just an Instagram post, there's a lot of planning and thinking that has to go through. So for example, I'm working on a campaign right now where they send you a template. It's not like, here's what we need you to do, deliver it on this day and be done with it. You have to submit first what the photos are going to look like, what the caption is going to say, and all of the stuff. So there's all this preliminary work that goes into it. Then the brand approves it, and then you go and you produce the content, and then you edit the photos, and then you actually post the thing. So it's not as straightforward as you might think. Especially if it's coming through an agency where and working with big brands, there's a lot more work involved. There's
layers of approval, I imagine.
I want to add something to just in case you had mentioned in your email about reviews, product reviews. I don't do product reviews, and that's a matter of personal policy, because I feel like for paid product reviews anyway. Like if I'm going to do a review, I have to have bought that thing with my own money, because I feel like it is the only way that the review can be honest. I don't care if they come to me and say, hey, here's a product, try it out, like, and give us your honest review. Not possible, because you've taken something for free, and I'm always going to feel like I owe them something. I owe them to say something nice. But this is by far the most common pitches that I get. Take this product and just talk about it to your audience. No, if I want to talk about it to my audience, I will buy it, or we actually do or we determine first that I like it, and we actually do a proper paid promotion of some sort for it. So I never do anything for product. We've mentioned about this, but I also don't do reviews, even if the brand says honest review is okay. Yeah,
that's very interesting. It reminds me, many years ago, I was doing some influencer outreach for a printer company, and I sent a bunch of printers to bloggers just to review, and then they were going to send them back. And then the printer company was like, "Oh no, they can keep them." And I was like, "Oh no, I don't want to try to like influence the outcome of these." So I had to wait until everyone's review was done and published, and then I could be like, "Oh no, you can keep it. It's okay."
Yes.
So then we had authenticity at least.
Yes, because it's not possible for you to feel like, if you give me something and I don't like it, now I feel like I can't say bad things about it because there's this nice person that just gave me this thing, and now they are hoping that I'm going to say something nice back. And if I don't have anything nice to say, I'm going to feel bad.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So your policy is actually good. Like, they don't have the thing. They don't know that they have the thing until it's over.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I know this has been a super interesting conversation, and I know my students will be fascinated by it. And so
you're welcome.
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.